Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker. Now, let's start the show. Hi, Authors Love Readers podcast listeners. I hope you're all doing well today. This is a special episode. It's kind of part two. I did a podcast with Joanna Penn, the Creative Penn podcast. It's very well known in the indie world among authors. And we had such a good conversation. There was about half of what I wanted to say that we could get to. So I thought I'd follow up here and get to some of the points and share some of the points that I wanted to make in that podcast. And you can find it. You can find part one under the Creative Penn podcast, and it's available at all the big outlets. One of the things I wanted to say, and let me say, first of all, this is much more for writers. I don't know how interested folks who come here for the reader aspect are going to find this, because it's, it's about the business. It's about technical stuff, but you might. So I hope you'll give it a try if you have any interest in this. So the first thing I wanted to say, and I really, really wanted to say this on the Creative Penn podcast, Joanna had asked me a question about the futurist, and that she shares futurist topics, and I have told her in email and in person how much I appreciate those and how impressed I am by them. And she mentioned that and then said, how do you think the author publishing world will change in the next decade? And what are you excited about? I thought, that's a great question. That is a fabulous question. But before I answer it, I wanted to say to all the authors out there listening, and also if you're just interested in the author world, or you're interested in tech, and especially how it intersects with reading and writing, I highly recommend that you listen to Joanna's episodes about the future, because she is doing for us most of the work. She gathers the information, she keeps track of a lot of different sources, and then shares that with us and helps to open our eyes of what is coming. And I know there's some folks out there who are saying, I'm not really into artificial intelligence, or it scares me, or it bothers me, or I don't like it in theory, or, whatever it is about the future, they have reluctance about it. Well, it's going to come. The future is going to come. And you have, I see it as you have three choices, especially for those of us who have writing careers, as we're driving down the highways of those careers. The road is going to twist and turn. Okay? We can keep driving the way we've been driving. And when an S-curve appears out of nowhere, we'll crash. Or you can slow enough that you can negotiate unexpected S-curves when they pop up. But you're not going to get anywhere very fast. The third approach is to drive at highway speeds while you're anticipating, aided hugely by road signs, courtesy of people like Joanna Penn, and we're not having to make our own. And so you can drive along at highway speeds, and you can keep your eyes out for those warning signs that her information has helped you gather. And then you can negotiate those curves without losing a whole lot in the process. Among the behavioral sciences, behavioral economics in particular has proven that when we think we're being really logical and well reasoned, we often aren't. That our lizard brain takes hold and has a lot more impact than we think or want to give it credit for. And one of the ways that it does that is through something called loss aversion. There have been a number of experiments, and you can look that up if you're interested in it. It's pretty fascinating. And we try to avoid loss. This is talking specifically in economics, but it happens in other things too. We try to avoid loss at the expense of a greater gain. Callie doesn't like that. And I hope that you will, I hope we all, myself included, will think about that as we negotiate change, which has the potential for loss and also has the potential for gain. And greet it not as a grim reaper necessarily, but as a more even-handed, it gives some, it takes some. And as I said, the way we maximize what it gives is by knowing what's going on, being alert to what's happening. I don't think we can prepare per se, but we can have our eyes on that road that I talked about, reading the signs that people so kindly post for us. And I really, really hope that if you're looking to have a career into another decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, you want to keep writing, that you will pay attention to what Joanna Penn is saying in particular. I just can't emphasize that enough. So, having not answered Joanna's question after giving it to you, I will back up and say, I am really excited that we have absolutely no idea what exactly is going to happen. You know, talk about a cliffhanger. That this is the constant cliffhanger. I'm excited that whatever happens, it is highly unlikely that it will narrow the possibilities of how to have a writing career from where we are now. And where we are now is a wide open meadow of flowers compared to the narrow, trouble-plagued alleyway that was and is traditional publishing. In my experience, you know, there are some people who have gone into traditional publishing and it has been a fabulous experience for them. So this is strictly my experience. Publishing and the opportunities took this huge leap with the opening up of indie. And I can't see that it's not going to be even wider and broader than it is now. So I think that is all to the good. How exactly that happens, I don't know. But my hope and expectation is that there will be even more viable business models for authors. And what that does for readers is give them more choice. And it gives them choice in areas that are too specific and don't have a deep enough audience for traditional publishing to ever touch. And so the more we can have ways for authors to write books and make a living at it, the more broad an audience of readers we will serve. So I'm all for that. And I want to emphasize that I think that the writers in particular need to pay attention to, I'll say specifically what Joanna is saying and the information that she brings. Futurism is not necessarily saying this thing right here is absolutely going to happen. And it's going to happen in this amount of time, and it's going to mean A, B, C, and D. what I see it more is raising our awareness, giving us markers to watch. And as events continue and we can start to see, oh, look over here, this thing is happening, and that means things might go in direction A or maybe D or S, but probably not L. And so you start seeing where things might be heading, and it opens your eyes up to what the possibilities are. And I will tell you a story. I've said this in writers groups fairly often, but in 2007, I was the president of a group called Novelist Inc. And I had read a book by Chris Anderson, who was then the editor of Wired magazine and now is the head of TED Talks. He had written a book called The Long Tail, and I was fascinated by this and thought, what the heck? So I invited him to come talk to our conference, which was in San Diego that year. And he accepted, and he came down, and probably didn't make much of an impression on him. It was one of many, many talks that he'd given, I'm sure. But he stood in front of this room full of all traditionally published authors, because there wasn't anything else really at that point. And he said, publishing as you know it is dead. And there was an audible intake of breath across the room. And I believe I was the one who asked him, well, what's going to replace it? And he said he didn't know. But he also said to watch the music world. But because of what he said in that room that day, and I know a number of other people have told me who were there that day, also were aware, alert, noticed the things happening leading us to indie publishing. So I had my book. I started a website to sell directly to people. Not a very viable business model, especially at that point, but I wanted to have that. And I still have the URL. If all the vendors go nuts, I still can come back and use that. And it also meant that I got into putting my books up on the major e-tailers in 2010, which was fairly early. And to me, that is the benefit of paying attention to what the possibilities are in the future. And if you want to pay attention to what the possibilities are in the future, and you don't want to do all the work, for heaven's sakes, listen to Joanna Penn's podcasts on the futurist topics and let her know you appreciate them, because it's not easy, the work that she's doing. And it means we don't have to do that work. So let's all encourage her to keep doing it. Okay. So that was one of the things that was a vital thing I wanted to say on the podcast. And we just didn't have time. We had so many other things we were talking about. She also asked a question that we didn't have a chance to get to, about how has my marketing changed over time, and what works best for me now. And one of the points I want to make to all the writers out there, whether you're aspiring, whether you're just starting out, whether you're established, if you're established, you probably know this, but it is an amazing time for reaching a specific readership. I feel so fortunate that I'm able to connect with people who get my humor, my dry humor in a lot of the books, who appreciate the mixes that I include. That there's a mystery, but there may also be a little romance. There's some history. There's there dogs. There are often dogs in there, and that they like that. So they like the same mix or combination that I do. It's fantastic. And in fact, it's darn near a miracle. Early in my, or not so early, but in my traditional career, I had an editor at Harlequin who told me that my books would never be reprinted because they just were not popular enough. And that stung. It definitely stung at the time. They were, and in my traditional career, I did well enough that they didn't cut me, and heaven knows they cut a lot of people, some of whom are doing fantastically now, bless their hearts. But I never did well enough to really get traction and get going. So I was this kind of low middle of the road. But after I got over the sting of that editor's words, it also triggered my says you reaction. And so I started getting my rights back when there was nothing to do with them, absolutely nothing. But I thought if they weren't going to reprint my books, which could have been a source of income, not a whole lot, but a small trickle of money coming in, I wanted them in my hot little hand. I wanted those rights. And that became the foundation of my indie career. That started me off. Those were the backlist books I had to put up back in 2010. And I want to make the point that Harlequin was not wrong. Those books weren't popular enough with Harlequin's audience in that market at that time. What indie has done is created multiple, well, indie and ebooks. I shouldn't say just indie, it's ebooks especially, have created multiple audiences, multiple markets. And that is what is letting the readers find what they really want and the writers to write what they really want. It has opened the gates wide on audiences. And for me, it makes sense to write the book and then look for its audience. Because as I said other times, the writing leads me, and the business supports the writing rather than vice versa. Now, did I mention that this is not necessarily easy? It's not. But the fact is that it's possible. And that just feels like a miracle after those years in traditional. So I'm not saying that you don't have to pay attention to the basics of the business. You do. You absolutely do. Some of the things that I think are really important for me, one is offering first in series free. It feels to me like a good way to look for a reader author fit. Do we match? And I would like to think it's no harm, no foul if we're not a good one. Although, sometimes you get those cranky reviewers and they do feel they got the book for free and they still are going to be pretty nasty. And what I have learned, thanks to my dear writing friend Lisa Mondello, is to say they were not my people anyway. So her line is, those are not my people. It's one of the two most important things I've been told about in marketing. You get a 1-star review out of left field. You get people unsubscribing from your newsletter. You'll think, oh, that's the... But those are not my people. The folks, the redheads on my newsletter, the folks on Facebook, those of you who have written me emails, you are my people. And I'll add something to Lisa's wisdom. Why would you spend your time angsting over people who are not your people? You know, if they unsubscribe, let them go. Wish them well in their efforts to find something that's a good reader, writer fit for them. But I want to spend my time on the readers who are my people, or at least have the potential to be. So that would be, I hope, a word of wisdom to fellow writers. And that's through Lisa Mondello. Another piece of wisdom I was given is really, really important to me about marketing is to remind myself that I am not my audience. And I need to thank heavens for that every day, because I'm a pain in the patootie as an audience. I'm deeply grateful that my readers are not nearly as cranky as I am, and that they seem to enjoy interacting with me. And I just, I'm really grateful for that. So I try to remember to find out what they want in the way of interacting with me, rather than what I would want in the way of interacting with an author. Let's see. Joanna also asked what was working for me best. I'm doing less advertising. I'm struggling with some of that, and it's both time and money. I'd love to figure out a way to do more word of mouth promoting. So if any of you are listening who are my readers, please tell one person each that how much you love my books and suggest that they try them. There, I've done it. That's my marketing. Let's see, what else did we get to? Oh, Joanna and I were talking some about, there is some in the podcast about how there's no formula on how to write or how to have a career. I think a lot of aspiring writers wish there were, but it's actually really good news that there isn't. It gives you so much freedom, and I think especially in this age of indie, writing career is a lot about winging it. Making it up as you go. And since we make things up, we should be pretty good at this, right? Now, I am not saying that you can forget all the smart things to do in presenting your work. And that's especially those things that treat your readers the way you would want to be treated. So to me, that means write a book you want to read. Don't write down to your readers. Remember that both storytelling and writing craft matter. There are some folks who are talking about going for that lowest viable product. I do not care for that at all. As a reader, I would be one of your cranky reviewers if I reviewed. I just don't think that's fair or a respectful way to treat your readers. So to me, it's important to get us. It's not only important, but this is going to help you in your as you're starting as a writer. Get editing, write in a series if you possibly have series inside you, because it's not just marketing. Think of it from the reader's point of view. If they read a book by you and they want to read more, there is a comfort level. Well, it's not just a comfort level, but there is a comfort level in staying in that same world with you. And even though they've liked the first book, you're still a pretty new quantity to them. So give them a chance to really get their feet wet in your body of work, in your worldview, in your creations. And that's one of the reasons I think series are so important for writers early in their careers. And there are also marketing concerns, which a lot of other people talk about too, that if you promote that first book and then you have multiple books that follow it, you can spend a little more in promoting the first book and make it back in the subsequent books. So it's a practical aspect too. But notice I didn't say the practical part first. All right. So editing, writing a series, if you've got a series in you, and get a good cover. I think those are really important. Now, when I say a good cover, I will note that, well, I'm not going to say that yet. I'll come back to this in just a second. There are lots and lots more things that established writers or publishing experts will tell you you must do. And most of that is out of the goodness of their hearts and sincere efforts to help you. And they can be common sense and practical things to do. But I am here to tell you, you don't have to do them all. You will potentially pay the consequences of not doing some of them. And you need to recognize that. You need to be reasonable about this. But I can tell you that things that I've been told that I should do, among the things that I don't have, I don't do advanced reader copies. I don't have a street team. I don't plot, as I talked about quite a bit with Joanna. We talked about being discovery writers. Also, some people call them pantsers. I do not do big releases. I refer to them as stealth releases. I don't have a Facebook group. I don't write 12 books a year. There's probably a lot more of those, but I've gotten to the point that a lot of times when I hear writers who have had success in a certain way saying you have to do this, you have to do that, I think, don't wanna, not gonna. Now, I do then have to be realistic in my expectations and to recognize that it can be a trade-off and accept the consequences. And there probably are, I'm sure there are consequences in those things. Not having a big release, not having a Facebook group might be or have hurt me, but I'm willing to take the consequences, and I'm willing to recognize that that's a trade-off. To me, that's part of building the career, the individual career that you want, how you want your success to look. And I don't want my success to look anything like me having to do a lot of stuff I don't want to do. I mean, there's some I do. You're just, you got to be a grown up. But there are a lot of things you don't actually have to do. And if I don't want to do them, I will live with that consequence. I think that you've got to enjoy the process of the writing and to an extent, the process of the business. Or as Joanna and I both said, there are a lot of other jobs out there where you can make more money without putting as much heart and soul into it. If you don't enjoy these processes, get out now. Truly, save yourself while you can, because it's consuming, and who wants to be committed to doing stuff you don't like for forevermore? That's my philosophy anyhow. So speaking of philosophy, I talked a little bit on the podcast about my financial philosophy. And this also came up in a writer's group. First, I want to say, when we talk about, Joanna and I both talked about six-figure income. That's gross. And it is vital that you recognize that's what most people are talking about when they talk about six-figure authors. They're talking about the total amount of income that comes in. But what really matters is your net. How much money after expenses, including taxes, you still have in your accounts. And you can have six-figure authors who are clearing, $10,000. You can have six-figure authors who are clearing, say they both are at 120,000 annual gross income. Somebody could be clearing 80, 85, maybe even 90,000. So the gross is a shorthand, but it is an inaccurate shorthand. So keep that in mind whenever you're thinking or hearing somebody talking about six-figure or seven-figure or any of those figures. Net is the gold standard. And coming back to the philosophy about the looking at the finances, I hear a lot of starting authors who want to set the business up and think they need to set up all this infrastructure. I would say don't spend your time and your energy and your creativity in setting up a business structure unless the writing supports it. You don't need a complex business infrastructure to start, or for most of us, probably ever. Start simple, emphasize the writing, because without the writing, there's no business. So in the early years, I kept a folder, really complex here. And I would put receipts and credit card statements in it with writing related expenses noted. I do not recommend this method anymore, but that's how I did it for 20 plus years. And I also always did my own taxes as a sole proprietor. What I recommend now, as I said in Joanna's podcast, no debt, stay out of debt, build in financial cushions, have them be multi-layered, and then have a business account, business bank account, checking, and have a business credit card. Ideally, look for one that has categories. I run all my expenses through one or the other of those. My business checking account or my business credit card. They are at the same bank. At the year's end, I pull reports from each of those. If you can, on your credit card, create categories, that's great. That would be ideal. And then make them match the Schedule C expenses. If your credit card has categories, but they have set the categories and you can't change the names of them, that's what mine is like. I create equivalents. So their category is automotive. Well, I use automotive to stand for advertising, AA. So that connects in my mind. Or health and wellness is for contract work, the people who help me, my various assistants, because they are helping my health and wellness. So that's how I have these equivalents to the categories the credit card set up with the categories in Schedule C. And then I pull an annual report at the end of the year. It's already got those categorized. I add in the expenses from the checking account, and voila, my Schedule C. Also, then you can use the income on the checking account to double check your income records. I keep a record of monthly income from each source, each vendor, and I keep that in an Excel spreadsheet, one of the simplest Excel spreadsheets you've ever seen. And I double check my income figures with the bank's income figures at the end of the year. I tried QuickBook. I tried Quicken. Both of them were huge wastes of time for me. I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out how their rules would get me to the information I wanted, and I just wasn't worth it. So right now I have reports from the credit card. I have the checking account. I do still have a thin folder for miscellaneous cash expenses. and then run them through Excel, and I'm done. I did create an LLC about 6 years ago, so about 26 years after I started having writing income. I did it primarily for estate purposes, which I don't intend to be an issue for another 40, 50 years, but you got to be prepared. Unless you are making enough net that you are filing, that filing as an S Corp would be, and this is US taxes, filing as an S Corp would be beneficial to you. Most of you probably do not need an LLC. Be sure before you make the decision one way or the other that you check in your states, because LLCs vary greatly from state to state. So cost, ease of establishing it, all that stuff, and the cost, not only the initial cost, but the cost of upkeep, annual taxation usually on it. Check all those things out before you decide. Also check your state and local jurisdictions for taxes and licenses required for self-employed, possibly working from home as well. In other words, get yourself squared away with the government. Don't go in debt. Build financial cushions. Match the investments of time and money that you're putting into business infrastructure to what the writing is earning. Profit, net, not gross earnings. And then you can adjust that as your business grows. So another thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is why I wrote Survival Kit for Writers Who Don't Write Right. Joanna and I talk quite a bit about being a discovery writer. And I think one of the hardest things about it is being urged by well-intentioned people to give up your process and become a plotter. If only you do that, everything would be simpler. And that's just not true for all of us. So I wanted to write the book to encourage writers who don't write right, in quotes, to respect their process, test it against reality and whether it could be better, but not to throw it away. You're given, at least this is the way I feel, I have been given this ability, and this is the way the stories come to me. And I am not going to turn my back on that. I'm not going to refuse those gifts. I do try to refine the process. I'm always looking for ways to make it better. But I hope that if somebody is out there listening to this who is struggling, that you will not give up and you will not feel alone. The book, Survival Kit for Writers Who Don't Write Right, came out of workshops by that title. And I've only given it, I think, 3 times, maybe 4. But each time I gave it, somebody came up afterward with tears in their eyes because they felt that they weren't alone. Maybe they felt vindicated, and they had been feeling that they couldn't write the way their creativity was telling them to write. So I don't want that to happen to people. And I am not anti-plotting. It doesn't work for me. It does work for other people. It works for a lot of people. And so I encourage people to try it cautiously. But as I said to Joanna, I've also lost books by trying to plot, and that makes me even sadder. So I wanted to say also, in addition to the Patricia McLinn at Facebook, which is more about my books and my dog and my garden and those sort of things, I also have a Facebook page called Word Watch. And that was my first writing book, which is a word usage. When do you use further? When do you use farther? Things like that. Another book I highly recommend. It is only available in ebook. And so now I use the Word Watch Facebook page to talk about both of those writing books. And I wanted to also tell you that Survival Kit is $2.99 at the regular ebook retailers. But if you go to my website, patriciamclinn.com, under books, you can get it for 99 cents, because I wanted anyone who needed that discovery writer pantser boost could get it, could afford it for 99 cents. So I hope this has been of some use and some interest to you. You can see why we couldn't do all of this on one podcast for Joanna, because I have I think I about doubled the length of her talk. And if you have questions, please let me know. If you would like to hear more about writing or my thoughts on the business or the craft, let me know. If you readers out there are going, no, don't tell us any more about that, let me know that too. So I hope to hear from you, and I hope that you have good writing and good reading until we meet again. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye.